Hey, John Gilroy here. In classic Western movies, they talk about rounding up them doggies. Well, today, we're going to put on our cowboy hat and take a look at rounding up them LLMs. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Elad Schulman, CEO of a company called Lasso Security. Easy to remember, Lasso.security to go to the website. I went to the website, and Elad's got a cowboy hat on. What's going on here, Elad?
Hey, John. Happy to be here. And yes, you're in a cowboy land of Lasso Security. So happy to be here.
Yeah. We're not going to talk about cowboys or rounding up them doggies. We're going to talk about generative AI in the federal government. And everyone knows it's a bright, shiny thing. Elad's chasing it, and everyone's chasing this shiny object, and generative AI this and generative AI that. And I think what we have to do is maybe take a detached look and look at security, and you're a security company, and best practices for handling Gen AI in a specifically a federal environment. So what's the biggest challenge you see that federal agencies have just in diving into the Gen AI pool?
Basically, it's a whole new world that started, in late 2022 when everyone got to know ChatGPT, and this is, I think, the first time in history that technology is running, the fastest we've seen, definitely faster than us chasing it. So with that, there are a few challenges. One is that all of the employees of federal agencies, they see everyone using technologies like ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, and others. That increases their productivity. They want to use it as well. And we want to give them the chance to use it because it helps us move forward. Along with that, the citizens of the United States are using these technologies on their own. They're expecting same productivity increase from the federal government with the services that we get. And along with that, whenever a federal agency is developing new capabilities, introducing LLM technology out there is, again, increasing the productivity, allowing things to run at paces that we've never seen before. And this is all basically getting us to the new era of Gen AI. And I think that if we're taking the cloud revolution, the internet revolution, and we combine them together, this Gen AI revolution is larger than both. So running at those paces is something that, you keep on changing those. And we'll talk about this in a bit. Security, safety is definitely a big challenge of that. And usually in the past, security was holding back these kinds of technologies. Not anymore. Those technologies are out there, and we need to enable everyone to use them, but do it in a safe and secure way.
I think if I went to a trade show in DC and I just walked up to someone, they'd say, generative AI basically learns from existing data and can create text and videos based on that. And that sounds pretty innocent. Now, as the first step is, what kind of a large language model are you using, and where do they get that information from? I mean, you have to start with the basics here, don't you? I mean, if you're going to generate something from a pool of information, well, what's in that pool, huh? Is that where you start?
Exactly. That's some of it, because again, I'll give some anecdotes from the past. These LLMs were trained on the internet. And as such, we need to consider a lot of those as suspicious and things that we don't know what we're putting in our hands. 30, 40 years ago or whatever, if we found a USB stick drive on the floor, we wouldn't, the recommendation would not to stick it into the computer. We don't know where this came from. So same way, the models that were trained on whatever data, we don't know what they have. You don't know what data they were trained of. We don't know if you're using them, where this data is stored. Is it being, so if we're sending something there, is it used for later on training? We can lose our intellectual property or sensitive information. We don't know what's happening. And people are not necessarily reading into the end user license agreement of each and every one of those tools. They don't know where those tools reside. They don't know what they do with the data. So the basic understanding is to know what you're using, what's out there, what would be the terms of service, and a bit cautious. And this relates to, as organizations, as federal agencies, define a safe use policy before we talk about enforcing anything, what you can use, what you should be aware of, and later on how you can keep track of those as these evolve.
So if you owned a company called Elad's Donuts and you had a blog, you could probably generate all kinds of content, and who cares? Here's a maple donut, here's a cinnamon donut, but the federal government, of course, handles much more sensitive and regulated data. And so when you are dealing with federal agencies and you're trying to create a specific LLM using secure, so what are the first steps? Are even doing something like that?
So on that, basically, you're starting with evaluating all sorts of models. It could be commercial models. It can be things that are open source, so open source versus closed source. You can use things that are available on a cloud or things that you can have on-prem. And then you're starting to experiment with it. But basically, you need to understand the boundaries of it. Are you going to keep this completely internally? Are you going to expose it to the internet? Are you going to expose it to citizens? Are you going to expose it to the employees? Which data can be put in there? Which data is coming back from it? And you're starting to put, boundaries around it of safe usage. And of course, different, not just policies, but ways to enforce the policy. So if, for example, the policy would say, do not share sensitive information with that tool, how can you enforce that? So if someone is trying to share sensitive information, how can you detect it? How can you block it? Another example, which we just saw quite recently in one of the agencies, you want to let people use, for example, ChatGPT, but with a specific account that belongs to the agency, maybe with the specific terms of service. But what happens if they're using their personal account, their Gmail account? Will you be aware that this is happening? Can you enforce any policy there? Do you want to prevent them, to allow them to use that? And so on and so forth.
I can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, how many miles is it from Boise to Seattle? And it'll probably tell me. And we can do that in Google too. It's pretty good. I don't know how they got that answer. I have no idea. And so when some people look at generative AI, they talk about glass box, white box, black box. And I think ChatGPT is kind of a mystery. It's a black box. I have no idea how they can show me your work. Well, I don't know what the work is. But federal agencies may want to turn to you and say, Elad, okay, now show me how did you get that conclusion? So observability is part and parcel of the security process.
So definitely observability and also reasoning and explainability. So why we got to the answer that we got and giving the full transparency is definitely key. Definitely if they want to trust us as securing them. And I'll relate to one of the things that you mentioned, and those also relate to security. A lot of these models are working in a statistical approach. So whenever you're getting an answer, you don't know if this is true or not because it is statistical. In some of the cases, the models can hallucinate an answer, which is completely irrelevant. Once it's coming to security, for example, it would hallucinate specific pieces of code or code that does not exist and will recommend you things to use. That could be hazardous to the organization, to the agency, in case you're using something that you've not vetted. So, and these models don't necessarily provide you that explainability. So for us, definitely around security, if we blocked something, if we said that something is malicious or something is not safe, we have to explain it. We have to provide that reasoning. Otherwise, it's not trustworthy. As simple as that.
In August, I'll be driving from Boise to Seattle, and so I want to know the mileage there. And, that's not going to change. Now, the federal government may deal with different types of information. You use the word malicious actors here.
Right.
And so federal agencies are constantly under attack. And if I give you a report on something that happened last week, that's not going to be, you need to be observable, but you have to have some real-time observability, don't you?
In this world, you have to, especially if you're working with the outer world, but not just. As these technologies are running so fast, changes are not happening, once a quarter, once a month. Changes are happening every week and sometimes, several times a day. You need to chase those. The adversaries are constantly inventing, new techniques. Our research teams are constantly on it and are finding new techniques. You need to update your defenses in paces that we have never seen before. So one of the things for us, which is a challenge, we cannot be bound into a development lifecycle or release lifecycle that is once a quarter, because we need to push our latest technology to the hands of the federal agencies as fast as we can. Sometimes in the private sector, in the commercial market, we're pushing updates several times a day. And more than that, real-time defense is key. especially if you're working, with commercial models that are outside the boundaries of your organization, because in this world that you cannot delete data that got to the model, you cannot undo it. So the right to be forgotten is taken away from us. So if you lost sensitive information to the model, you cannot undo it. So you have to block it in real time. You have to react as things are happening. Otherwise, you've lost that battle.
Reacting normally involves workflow. And there's all kinds of workflows in this town. There's big companies that have events, one coming up in 2 weeks, and they focus on workflow between the hybrid cloud and on-prem and off-prem. Now, generative technologies are becoming integrated into this workflow. So, Elad, what could possibly go wrong? You want to take 3 hours on this?
What can possibly go wrong? So
Yeah.
let's touch on the latest hot topic that everyone is talking about, which is agents and MCP. And we're talking about Gen AI technologies that are going to perform actions on their own in a non-deterministic way that we cannot predict. So what can go wrong? Everything can go wrong. And one of the things that, all of us have grown on when we were kids is, Skynet in Terminator in 1984. What can go wrong? It can eliminate everyone. So basically, as this technology evolves, as we're relying on it more and more, as it can take actions on sensitive information, on things that, might be even defense-related capabilities, we have to make sure that if it's doing something on our behalf, it has to be 100% accurate, or that we have the right fail-safe mechanisms and we have the runtime protections to make sure that those does not happen. And as this market is growing more and more, we'll see these technologies everywhere. Everyone is going to use it. And as such, as I started with it, everything can go wrong, basically.
Yeah. So, Elad, let's say people are listening to this podcast and they're walking their dog or something. Well, where can they get more information at lasso.security? Is that the best place to go?
Correct. So Lasso.security, we have a lot of content there, a lot of research that we're publishing, a lot of quality content. So not necessarily, although we're selling, products, but we are trying a lot to educate the market and give back and make people aware to everything which is happening. So a lot of thought leadership pieces will be there, a lot of content. And if people want to learn more, there's a basic form there to connect with us, reach out and schedule, a meeting to discuss with us more. We're always happy to share, even if we're not trying to sell you anything.
Now we're going to do some time travel. We're going to go 10 years in the future, and historians are going to look at technology here in 24, 25. And I think a historian may look at 2024 and say, government was focused on security and having safe AI. And an argument probably is going to be made that in 2025, there's a transition to being more efficient and maybe throwing some of those security concerns overboard. So what trends today, 2025, do you see how federal agencies are approaching AI governance and security?
So we see that everyone is taking it really seriously. So they're looking to understand, what technologies are out there, what security mechanisms are there. They're exploring a lot of different capabilities. One of the challenges is really to keep the pace of innovation in the market. And I'm happy to see that a lot of agencies are reaching out to us to learn and basically try what we have and other vendors have to offer in this space. So definitely gearing up with governance capabilities, observability, runtime defense, and also pen testing and red teaming, the ability to evaluate what you're doing. And going forward, we're traveling 10 years into the future. I think that much earlier than that, we will have LLM Gen AI technology everywhere, every application, maybe every device that we will have. And as such, and you mentioned efficiency, which is happening now, AI is getting everywhere. And while regulation is sometimes more restrictive, sometimes less, it is fair to say, and I'm spending a lot of time, with U.S. senators across the board about AI. Everyone recognizes in the need to secure AI. So some will push more for AI adoption. Some will say, let's wait with it a bit. But this train had left the building. Everyone is adopting AI. But security and safety for that is agreed across the board. Everyone understands that this is something that they need to do, and everyone is arming themselves with technology in order to secure. Some faster, some slower, but it's fair to say that every agency that I've talked with is doing something, and within the next, I'd say 12 to 18 months, 100% of the agencies will have, Gen AI capabilities in production, securing them, and just growing with that more and more.
You mentioned about federal agencies, they're doing something. So what are the best practices here for federal agencies to adopt when working with vendors to address Gen AI risks?
So the best practices, first of all, as I mentioned earlier on, is to define a safe use of Gen AI. And there are already a lot of practices across the board. There are also frameworks out there like the OWASP Top 10 or MITRE Atlas and NIST that people can take whatever they want, pick and choose, but they are becoming standards more and more. And afterwards, starting to put the right controls. We mentioned observability, understanding what is happening, how systems are using them, putting the right controls to make sure that they can prevent things as they happen and react to those. And definitely, they need to be out there. They need to look for the various vendors that are addressing what's happening. We are very happy to share information and what we see. And a lot of it, and I'm happy to say that a lot of agencies are doing that, is learn what the private sector is doing. All the innovation which is coming, from the financial sector and the healthcare, which is driving that, again, at paces that we've never seen. So learn what they're doing, adopt it, bring and test all these technologies. Sometimes you need more than one. You need several of those. And cybersecurity is like an onion. It's layers. You need one layer after the other. So you need to evaluate multiple solutions, and you need to play with it and be comfortable with it and really find the right partners, because eventually it is partnership led. So you need to partner with the right vendor, and you need to build the trust, and you need also to train them on some of the things that you are working on, and maybe you need them to adopt. And we're doing this with the agencies that we're working with. We're learning what they're doing and trying to adopt what we are doing in order to provide the best capabilities for their specific use cases. And I have to tell you, every agency has its own use cases. And one of the challenges that I have is how can I fit into all of them? And part of our technology, and again, if people want to learn more, is the ability to react very, very fast and be very flexible for each agency's use cases. And again, not in a way that I'll tell them within 6 months I'll have something, but tell me your use cases. Within a week, I'll have something for you.
Yeah, good. I went to Lasso Security. You see this cowboy there, so I gotta ask you a funny question here about a technology leader by the name of Billy Crystal, and he had a movie called City Slickers. And what happened was he'd go to some ranch and he was trying to learn how to ride a horse and maybe how to wrestle up them doggies or herd the cattle or something. And I'm looking at the picture of you with a cowboy hat on, and so, Elad, you go to a dude ranch and you learn how to ride a horse. You're a beginner. So what if you're a federal agency and you're just starting this journey with generative AI? And so what's the first step in doing this and then step by step maybe from there?
So the first thing is doing a lot of learning. So learning what the technology, what it can do, what are the risks around it. And there's a lot of content out there, but there are also a lot of experts. So find the right, experts, either the ones that are consulting you on cybersecurity or maybe work with relevant consultants around AI. I'm surrounding myself with a lot of those. And if people want, I can, we're the experts in security, but we have, also experts in core AI. There are the vendors that you trust, there are the resellers that you trust. All of those have a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that you can accelerate what you're doing. So the basic thing is to get a good understanding, but you don't have to do it alone. There is really, everyone today is using it. And unlike before, when we were talking about the cloud, it took a lot of time until there was a lot of adoption in the cloud. So if you look to your right or to your left, you might not have seen a cloud expert. But today, in Gen AI, everywhere that you will look, you will find people that are using Gen AI and Gen AI experts. Just find the ones that are are trustworthy, the ones that are been doing it for quite quite a long time. And again, there's no one that's doing it for 20 years, but if you're doing this for the last, 5 years, you're already one of the experts in the world. So a lot of training is needed, a lot of education, definitely also internally for a lot of stakeholders. A lot of people within agencies are involved with that. People not just from security, but people that are handling, the core AI engine or data or governance or legal and auditing. There are, in a lot of organizations, there are task forces that are being built. So gather a lot of different disciplines and educate them and push this forward within the organization.
This is a great interview because you use any insider baseball terms like RAG and exfiltration and poison data. You just give good basic points that are practical and can be applied. So I think it's going to be a good one for people to take the transcript and go through it and understand it better. Yep. We're running out of time here, Elad, unfortunately. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Elad Schulman, CEO of Lasso Security, Lasso, Lasso Security.